Hello, my name's Liam Monahan, and my online discussion assignment was on Pacific overtures. And I'm going to apologize in advance because I still have a sore throat, so I'm going to be taking some sips of water throughout this video. But let's get into it. So, Pacific Overtures was a play written by John Weidman, and the music was also by the late Sondheim. We all read up on him like not too long ago. And Pacific Overtures, it was casted on Broadway in 1976. And what it's mainly about, it's about the westernization of Japan. It takes place in the year 1853. So, sorry. So at the time, the island is in isolation and they're basically cut off from the rest of the world. And they live in peace, like everything's good. They're doing like just fine. And in the beginning of the play, there's a man named John Manjiro. He's a prisoner. He's taken in front of the shogun and his counselors because like a while ago he was out in the sea fishing and he got stuck out there, but an American ship came and they took him and brought him to America. I think it was like Massachusetts, or I don't know, they took him to somewhere in the US. And that guy became westernized. So like he returned to Japan wearing like, American clothes, and he had like American stuff. So he was like basically completely different when he came back. And by him coming back to the country, it was already a crime, as was leaving the country, even though it kind of wasn't really his fault. And the shogun said that like he's worthy of execution for breaking those two crimes. However, Manjiro like pleaded to the shogun. He told him that the Americans were actually planning on coming to the island to explore, and the shogun and his counselors did not like this. They liked how Japan was in peace, in isolation, and not involved with the rest of the world. So the counselors elected a samurai. His name was Kayama, as he was a prefect police, and they tasked him with with turning the Americans away. And that's exactly what he tried to do. The American sailors that came, they were led by Commodore Perry, and the way that they were presented, they were like very obnoxious. They gave off the vibe of like they were better than everybody else. And when Kayama was trying to turn them away, the Commodore Perry said, no, like we won't talk to you. We want to talk to the important people in Japan. So that meant like the shogun or like one of his counselors. And yeah, so he had to leave and they had to go tell the counselors that. And so what ends up happening is that the sailors end up going to an island on Japan. It was called Kanagawa, I believe that's how you say it. And what they did was basically they exchanged gifts. Like the Americans brought gifts from like about like American cultures, and Japan did the same thing but with their culture. So they traded gifts, and they thought the Japanese thought that was that. Like they're done, they won't come back ever again, and that was like what they were hoping. And the Americans actually the Americans did have a plan. So Commodore Perry in the play, he wrote in his like journal saying, we're gonna open up this country like one way or another. Basically it was kind of like a threat to Japan, and you'll see that like later in the play. That's kind of exactly what they did. So So yeah, so they end up going away, and then like they end up coming back to Japan. And what they do is they basically showed off their power. They kind of like intimidated the shogun of Japan by like showing them like their ships and like saying like what we can do to them. So the shogun like had no choice but to accept them like onto land, and this led to other countries coming. I believe Russia, the Dutch, French, and Great Britain also eventually came to Japan. They brought their ideas, and they Japan felt like they didn't really have much of a choice of what was going on, so they kind of just had to accept it. And so they let it happen, and the Japanese actually end up accepting the westernization, but now they become kind of a part of like the game as like what we see now, like all the countries try to compete for who's best, and that was like what the Japanese were planning on doing. They tried to surpass the Western countries at like their own game, so like they tried to just basically become better, and that's how like the play ended. So sorry. So some themes that I saw in the play, it was actually like very interesting. So when all the Western countries like came to Japan, like in this like later part of the play, they the samurai were tasked with kind of like overseeing them, like making sure like none of them got out of line or anything, and that kind of made me like connect it to how kind of like made me connected towards today. I found this connection how like there's immigration problems like in our country. There's people trying to come to our country every day, whether it's legally or illegally. And the illegal ones, they if they get caught, they get sent to like border patrol, like I don't want to say camps, but like detention centers. I believe that's what they call them. And it's kind of hard because like the border patrol agents, like they're just doing their job. They're overseeing like the country because that's what they're tasked to do. Because unfortunately, like not everybody that like not everyone that comes here is like doing the right thing. Like there's sometimes crime involved with immigrants, but most of them are hardworking people. Sorry, and it kind of makes you think like the border patrol agents are just doing their job at the end of the day. Like they're just people too. So related that because the samurai in the play actually grew towards the Westerners. Like they started to relate to them. They found that they have similarities, and that's how I think like some situations that happen in America are like today. It's just like that. Like people realize, oh, like they're just doing that. Like they're exactly kind of just like me. They're just working for their family, and that's kind of what they It's kind of like what it reminded me of. And also Steven Sondheim, as I said, he was like in charge of the music. It was actually very well. I'm pretty sure it was up for like many awards. I believe I read the Tony Award. It was like awarded, not awarded. I think it was nominated. I don't think they won, but it was still the music was very good. And like throughout the play, you can kind of hear like the change in the music. It became more Western, so you can notice that in the play. And some I'm sorry. I think it's kind of like the play kind of like talks about how kind of like brings up America's dark past, in my opinion. How like America kind of like like just broke into the, like other parts of the world, like as like in the play they opened up Japan and stuff, and I think like what the playwriter was doing was trying to like bring light to that, like how like America has done that in the past, like how they could try to control like every part of the world, and you can see that in today. Like you hear about it all the time. Like I learned about in school how like America like had a role in a lot of things, like other countries' governments and like how they're run. So I think it kind of sheds light onto that, and yeah, it was a very good play. I was very surprised. I kind of enjoyed it. Did not think I was, but I did. So that concludes my online discussion.